huge welcome to all of you on the call, whether you be a client, somebody in Method, somebody in GlobalLogic, and some of our new colleagues from Hitachi. You're all super welcome. I'm just going to get straight in and introduce the panel, and we'll get straight into the content. So on the call with you today, alongside me, are Sandrine, one of our design directors, who's pioneering our approach to sustainable design. Alongside, she's not quite with us yet. She's having connectivity issues, but Helen hopefully will be here too. She's our executive creative director, also working on something similar. We're also joined by Josh Miller, principal architect, who's backing this up with sustainable digital product development. And we've got Michael Ojo, who's figuring out the business models for a sustainable business. And it's a huge pleasure also to have Joshua Abramson on the call, who is heading up GlobalLogic's overall environment, social, and governance efforts. So today, we are going to be talking about why sustainability, why in the business of digital products and services is this important? What changes if we create digital products and services that are sustainable? What does that mean? And we're going to try and be as actionable as possible and leave you with tips and tricks to help you get started on your own sustainability journey, no matter where you are in that journey. We'll hopefully have time for Q&A as well. As you see, it's a big panel, so we'll try and keep it snappy. So diving straight in, it's the Conference of the Parties next week, COP26, hot on the heels of the Paris Agreement. The noise and chatter about the environmental impact of everything around us is everywhere. Plastics, agriculture, intensive agriculture, declining air quality, biodiversity, scarcity of resources, you name it. It's all very much in view. But what does this have to do with digital? And why are we talking about this in the context of, well, we're a company that does digital design and product engineering. So I'm going to turn over to you first, Sandrine. You've initiated a whole work stream along this, or about this in the whole design space. So what's it all about? Why?
Thank you, John, and hello, everybody. I'm super pleased to have this conversation today publicly. John, let me answer your question with a question. Do you actually know which has the largest carbon footprint between the UK, where you are currently, or the internet?
This sounds awfully like a trick question, Sandrine. So I'm gonna guess that it's probably the internet. Is that right?
Yes, shockingly, indeed, it is the internet. And if the internet was a country, it would be the 6th largest polluter. So as an example, globally watching online videos alone has a larger carbon footprint than the entirety of Spain. It's quite shocking, and there is more numbers to it and some papers and books written about that. And if you think about digital transition and the growing consumption of digital, that increases the direct energy footprint of information and communication technologies at a very fast pace, so much so that there are speculations that it could contribute up to 8% of the global greenhouse gas emissions by 2030, which is a key target for net zero for a lot of us. And just to put it into context, like 8% is actually more than twice what it does today. And it's also about 4 times what the aviation and industry is today. So it's quite shocking numbers. And if you think about like the digitization of every object and services around us, we tend to forget that digital is physical. And we need data centers to store content. We need all the transmission infrastructure to bring this content to people. And we need the hardware to access and interact with this content. So essentially the use and production of these 3 components is what makes up for the footprint that we are talking about. So back to your question and back to us. When you start being aware of this, it's very, very hard to stand still. And for us, it was just a wake-up call, and especially after the first lockdown, where all your, personal, professional activities started to have a digital mirror or a digital equivalent, it was very hard to just keep going like we've always done. So, and as you were mentioning, in the same way that we witness what's happening in other sectors, like, how you get around and electrification of vehicles, or how you dress in more ethical and sustainable fashion, or how we eat. We've been doing some work on agri-tech and, like alternatives to less extensive production of food. We thought, okay, there has to be a better way, also in digital, to lower our environmental impact. And so talking about digital products and services, we are quite in a privileged position, I think, as consumers, because we have options. We have the options to make different choices, like starting with the most simple, like maybe changing email provider or using an alternative search engine. But most importantly, I think we are very privileged as business consultants and solution builders, because we can create these alternatives and we can trigger long-lasting change. So it's really for us the opportunity to really take our responsibility for what we put out there into the world.
You're sort of hinting at something really important there, I think, which is obviously the scale of the thing is huge. And I don't know of many companies that are consciously doing digital design and development any different because of that. But you've been quite busy in this whole space. I mean, is it just a consumer thing? Should we all just stop using video conferencing? Should we all go back to old-fashioned methods? What is it? Should we be changing our providers? What is it we could be doing though, concretely?
I think we all have a part to play. But too often, when it comes to environmental issues or challenges or changing, it's always, the responsibility is always put on the consumer side. And we can play a role, but our personal impact is very limited. And when you look at numbers, actually, the major polluters are the industries. They are the companies that are supporting that. So we like to take the other way around, where we're thinking, okay, as creators, it's our responsibility. This should be built in to offer products out there where people don't need to think whether they are polluting or not. It's interesting for them to be aware about the footprint of what they are using, but it should be designed in a way that it is not the responsibility of the consumer. So effectively, it's like designing the low energy light bulbs or the biodegradable plastic bags of digital design. So it's really like making sure that we keep designing like the products that we are designing, but without breaking the planet any further and without putting the responsibility on the end consumer.
Now, in the context of what's going to be happening as of Sunday, so with COP26 starting next week, there's a lot of this in the general chatter at the moment. It's such a big thing. We're hearing all about net zero by 2030, 2050, 2060 in the case of some countries, never in the case of some others. Carbon neutrality, offsetting, it's all very buzzy right now. But to a certain degree, it has been for some time. Why is this trending right now? I mean, we could put this over to Joshua, if that's okay. You're taking on this mantle of ESG within GlobalLogic. I mean, why now? How have you seen sustainability become more of a thing within our own company?
It's a great question, and especially coming out of what can we do from the consumer side. And this is really what's happening from the investment side and following the money, and how the investment world has made such a tectonic shift that is impacting all of us downstream. So 2021 has been the year of sustainability, and the pandemic has been a tremendous force accelerator for furthering the conversation about our society's most urgent needs. And I think it's best to start first with what is sustainability, and it's way more than just the greening of business. And Robeco Asset Management says the focus in the investment industry is therefore shifting from creating wealth to creating wealth and well-being. And this is really well defined by the 17 UN Sustainable Development Goals that all United Nations member states adopted. So it's about creating social value, environmental value, and economic value. So we're not just talking about the environment, it's talking about the whole holistic picture. And what's caught the industry and consultants and the investment world and sustainability practitioners and us internally by surprise is the speed that sustainability has moved to the front burner. And so here it shows up for us in two ways. So our shorthand is to remain a supplier of choice and a vendor of choice, we need to have a compelling sustainability narrative. And number two is that we've been acquired by the Hitachi Group, who has one of the most mature sustainability stances among all global corporates. And sustainability is central and core to their business. So they're a principal sponsor of COP26. And in their latest integrated report, which is both their financial and their non-financial reporting together, their strategic focus area front and center is ensuring the viability of business in a sustainable society. We've set the goal of becoming a global leader in the social innovation business. And this is what we're going to hear a tremendous amount, especially for us, about the social innovation business, which is about improving quality of life and adding value for customers, social value, environmental value, and economic value, again. And that's squarely where we fit within Hitachi and what they're going to count on us for. So their number one strategic focus is social innovations using digital technologies and AI. And so for everyone here who's not part of the Hitachi family, here are where the levers of sustainability affect you. So as I said at the top, investments. And by example, Larry Fink and BlackRock, who have $9 trillion under investment, them saying climate change will be a defining factor in companies' long-term prospects. And they're calling on all companies to disclose a plan for how their business model will be compatible with a net zero economy. And so the knock-on effect of that is that all of the major companies in the world are now really looking at this and coming up with their own net zero pledges. And Hitachi, for one, they just upgraded their carbon neutrality pledge to have a 100% carbon neutral value chain by 2050. So the countless millions of people in the world who are touched by the goods, services, and products of Hitachi, that entire value chain is carbon neutral. So that's, a really stunning goal. And then you're seeing it on the regulatory side, where we're going to have mandatory reporting now on ESG related topics. And for here, and this is where I think we're feeling the most pain in other businesses as well, is that supply chain integrity rules the day. And we've seen at least a 5-fold increase in ESG questions in our RFPs, our RFIs, and compulsory questionnaires in the 10 months that I've been here. And with some of our biggest clients, a good CDP or EcoVadis score is now table stakes for remaining part of their supply chain. And this is a brand new development. And as a global citizen, these are amazing developments, and it's really heartening. And the mission that I'm signed on for, as David Brower, the father of US environmentalism, said, there's no business to be done on a dead planet. So we're not talking about this in the abstract. Sustainability is the only business conversation that we're in right now. And the 60s was the moonshot decade, and the 2020s are the earthshot decade. So this is our one sprint to the finish line to avoid cataclysm, and not for the earth per se. And we talk a lot about destroying the earth. Well, we're not going to destroy the earth. All we're doing is making it no longer viable to support us and maybe a million other species too. And the planet will do just fine. But regardless, we're all in the sustainability business now, and we need to make this a top priority. It's a non-negotiable anymore.
Wow. So I guess to kind of cut through all that in a way, you've got a terrific movement here of, there's been government action for a while, regulatory action for a long time now, but it's just it's reaching kind of fever pitch when it comes to just how we do business. I love what you say there, like we're all in the sustainability business now. There's another quite famous environmentalist I know, and the quote is something along the lines of, "Compliance is not a vision." I think we're starting to see the vision of what this can be for a lot of how we do business now. Thank you, Joshua. No, that's fantastic. So, as we've heard, more and more countries will be making and signing up to pledges. There's going to be huge ripple effects. There already are. Clients are invested in this, as we have seen indeed from the pressure that it creates along whole supply and value chains. So, what's different? What is changing? How are we creating and building digital products? I think it's fair to say we're not talking about digital transformation anymore. Well, the words are still used. It's still a thing. But the future of most businesses now is a combination of that plus social plus sustainable. In a way, if we're all in the sustainability business now, sustainability is the new innovation. And at this point, I'd like to sort of, I've already introduced you, Helen, but I'm great. I'm super happy you could join. So everybody knows who you are. But
Good.
Just like to bring you in at this point and just, you've been writing recently about how, design thinking is evolving. Like we're not really talking about human-centered design anymore. Why is that? And how do we approach projects in a different way?
Thanks, John. And my apologies to everyone for not having a video. It doesn't seem to want to turn on for me today. So you have a black box with my name. But effectively, the core of our business as designers hasn't changed. We still help our clients figure out what their future will be and craft the best products and service experiences to help them get there. But we ask the right questions to enable the right problems to be solved. But there are limitations to our tools and techniques when you add the additional focus of sustainability. And design thinking approaches that hero user needs are no longer broad enough to solve this level of complex challenge. The questions we have to answer have changed, and our task is now much more holistic in nature. And so we have to adapt, and we have to embrace a more systemic approach in the work that we do. So, I propose that the solution lies in bringing together designers and systems thinkers, allowing us to harness the power of creativity and science to create a new approach that enables true systems innovation. And to do this, we need to do a couple of things. But firstly, adopt a mindset that recognizes our ways of leading and operating, delivering have to evolve. Support this evolution by identifying, connecting the pioneers. Nourish and resource them so that they're free to question, to adapt, and to innovate together. And ensure that your teams are truly diverse. This is something we do at Method a lot. We have lots of different disciplines, and we also have cognitively a lot of diversity. And so ensuring that the wayfinders then will likely be those who've got alternative ways of thinking and looking at the world. Bring them into the center of your organizational change as you approach your sustainability issues. Remove competitive barriers and share progress. Sustainability is everybody's problem to solve, as we heard from Joshua. And think about the change as needed as akin to a movement. To be successful, it's both top down, bottom up, and everything in between. So I'm saying at the moment, I'm recommending that design companies stop following just the design thinking recipe and think about how to change the ingredients with the people and the planet at the heart of the approach. Employ designers with the skills to approach challenges iteratively through making, testing, and growing ideas whilst being creative and inclusive. And systems thinkers who can embrace that complexity, spot behavior patterns and interconnections, whilst determining how they cause and affect change. It's basically be holistic, non-linear, circular, and regenerative in everything that you do.
Okay, that's a lot. But I guess if I could characterize a little bit, it feels like we went down a design thinking rabbit hole for the last few years, which is to a certain degree the mistake we've all made is thinking of it as purely consumer-centered design, really. That's maybe controversial to some, but it feels like we need a much more system-led system understanding, system comprehensiveness to what we do. Excuse the grammar.
It's still valuable.
Yes.
We need
yes.
to make it broader.
Yeah. Yeah. No, absolutely. So non-linear, circular, regenerative. Taking that out of my level slightly, I just want to turn it over to Michael at this point. So you're a business design guy in Method, right? So I guess your stock in trade is making sure concepts and ideas that we come up with have a sense of organizational viability, commercial feasibility, and so forth. But what do you see that's changing at the moment as a result of all this?
Excellent. One of the sustainability in a broad sense is really flipping how we do business on its head, and clients, organizations, even individuals as consumers have this new paradigm of how we use or interact with products and services. And so some of the challenges that come up include, what is my impact on my environment, right? That's pretty obvious. Maybe by extension, what's my impact on my community? Companies looking to transform their business model start to look at these themes and start to figure out what are the measurements, how do we measure that, how do we measure impact from a social standpoint, right? And from an environmental standpoint, yeah, we can track emissions, we can track the amount of waste produced, but what is the measurable impact to our community or to our society in general? Other considerations too are the behavioral changes of consumers. So if I'm going to engage a customer of this company, I want to know that what they're doing is as meaningful to me, that it is sustainable, that they're not making a direct impact to my environment, to my community, as mentioned, and therefore, I'm gonna operate a little differently with my dollar. We vote with our dollars, and so there's new business models that may come up that say, for every, I'm more willing to pay a premium to this organization or pay a premium to experience this service because I know that they're doing something that is in line with my motives, my direction, maybe globally aligned with the direction of many of the businesses. As such, we need to again think about how we're going to measure that. How are we going to consider that? And from a business side, again, we don't want to be left on the side. And so these antiquated business models, perhaps these incumbent organizations, even think about our big tech companies, utilities, any sort of product or service industries. They've realized what we're doing now is not sustainable, right? When we think about the next step, I think there's new conversations being had around how do we collaborate, how do we change the paradigm around producer and consumer, B2B, B2C. There are spaces in which a traditional consumer could be a producer. So we think about energy, for example. Now more and more there are tools, mechanisms, services where I, as an end user, can generate my own power, my own energy, my own electricity, and perhaps sell that back or serve it back to another organization or to my community. And so those are the new kind of questions, the kind of direction that things are flowing. And while it is a big challenge, it does present the new opportunity to really, as you were saying at the beginning, transform from a sustainability perspective.
So I'm hearing all sorts of potential, even revenue streams different behaviors, and even business models. So the way in which things have always been done, take, make, waste, all changing to ways in which one person's waste is another person's raw material, and so on. We're seeing a lot of innovation in that sort of space. So I think it's fair to say, yeah, from what you're saying, this is a whole business model transformation, in addition to the need to design differently. I'm going to turn it to, we're talking about digital here, right? So I just want to bring it back to how we actually engineer digital products in a sustainable way. I'm looking at you here, Josh. So you're a principal architect here at Method. You have been doing some interesting experiments, if I understand it. So how do you build and engineer digital products in a sustainable way?
Sure, it's a great question, and it's really interesting for me to consider sustainability from the standpoint of technology. We often look to technology to solve sustainability challenges, but in this case, technology is both the problem and the solution, right? So it's an interesting way to approach the problem. So when we think about green engineering, there's some key principles that we really need to look at. There's a pretty expansive collection of what these principles are, but really you can boil them down to, for the sake of brevity, into the management of carbon and energy. And then to do that, we have to have the ability to measure both, right? So it's the management and the measurement. So it includes thinking about the amount of processing power that's used, the number of networking requests that are being made, the number of resources and assets that we transfer, and using techniques like just-in-time and lazy loading, tree shaking unused code, minifying our code, eschewing large do-it-all libraries for smaller and more purpose-built micro frameworks. And there are many techniques we can use to reduce payloads and only deliver the content that's needed over the wire as it's needed. But then ultimately, it requires that we build good observability into our systems so that we can monitor them and know what they're doing, what they're consuming, and where efficiencies can be gained. So I think that visibility is really important, and then measuring it in a way that you can understand how you can improve those performance metrics. So aside from specifics about how to build products that consume less, it's important for us to consider how we integrate with third-party products. Right, John, you recently shared a book with me, a great book called Net Zero, and they talk a bit, and I'm going to oversimplify this a bit, but about how the UK managed to reduce its domestic carbon burn or carbon outlay by outsourcing a lot of that carbon burn to other places. Well, the net knock-on effect was importing it back in, right, then really made the problem worse, right? So UK's metrics look better, but ultimately it's a net loss for the environment in some ways. And so we have to be careful not to fall into that same trap in technology. So we want to offload things to third-party solutions and to SaaS models and other sources, but we really do still have to consider the impact that those things have as we start to consume resources from other places. We have less control over what they're doing, how they do it, the efficiencies that they're using. And so the more things that we're able to own, the more things we're able to steer in a positive direction. So I'll say recently I put together a presentation for the larger engineering organization at Method. And we've started to socialize practices and principles within our own team. And we're trying to bring sustainability forward into conversations with clients and just start asking those questions earlier on. What are your sustainability goals? How can we bring sustainability into this process? And I'll say we've gotten a lot of good feedback already from clients. And then even when we interact with the GlobalLogic team in a larger sense and with the Hitachi team in a larger sense, we see that both of those organizations are really pushing forward, interested in sustainability. A lot of people are trying to push the narrative forward. And then obviously, as someone else said earlier, Hitachi already has a great and robust and very mature focus on sustainability now.
It's interesting you mentioned Hitachi there. I mean, we're obviously getting to know each other quite quickly since the news back over the summer there. And it strikes me as a pretty good exemplar of a huge organization that is not only thinking about how it complies with regulation as regards ESG, but proactively changes its business model to promote it, looks at its entire value chain, not just its own emissions or whatever. Yeah, it's if you get off on reading annual reports, it's a great read. But Josh, to sort of make it practical again, I guess if you're working on a digital product or a website or an app or something, I think it's probably fair to say if it's got loads of sort of preload video really high resolution images, has loads and loads of integration points and lots of little data points that pop up all over the screen and all over the real estate, that's probably going to be a fairly high carbon solution, right?
It is, in fact, yes. I think the statistic is failing me right now, but there's a very high percentage of network traffic that happens from websites that is just image loading, right? It's just image loading,
Wow.
image processing, and then sort of secondary assets like fonts and like video and other things that really serve to increase the carbon burn of our web products.
So, like, if you share a meme, for example, on say a product like Slack, you're uploading a 2 meg video file effectively to like 30,000 people. Is that right?
Yes, yeah, and again, it's a problem of resource usage, right? The likelihood that you're the first person to use that meme is pretty low, right? And so, you know, if there were a way within Slack that you could simply reshare a resource that was already available without having to re-upload that file, right, and spend the carbon burn to upload it and then to stream it to everyone, that would be an example of a way to reduce the carbon footprint of your website in a pretty simple way.
Yeah, and keep me honest here, right? Dark mode, good thing, helpful thing?
It's probably better for your eyes than it is for the environment. But you know, since we've progressed to new and more modern display technologies, the light emission is less of a concern, right? So when we were using CRT monitors and other kinds of monitors, certainly using a dark mode would have a higher impact on sustainability. Dark mode can be good for other reasons, for sustainability or for accessibility, and for other use cases that are adjacent to sustainability and in a lot of ways intertwined. But simply moving to dark mode alone isn't going to move the needle enough, you know, for it to be recommended for everyone simply for that purpose.
Thank you, Josh. I'm putting you on the spot a lot here. Thank you for that.
That's quite all right.
So,
all right.
So look, let's say we're all in, we're all convinced, you know, sustainability is the new innovation. This is business now. And we want to turn this into action wherever we are, whether it's our own organization, our bigger organizations, or outside. I wonder what would be your biggest bit of advice and or inspiration. And Josh, while we're on you, what would you share with the group?
Yeah, so it's fairly similar in my mind to learning anything else and tackling any new initiative, and it's to educate yourself. I think that's where everything starts from. You start to read, watch videos, immerse yourself in the topic of sustainability, and really think about it in the way that it pertains to the work that you do. You'll find analogies and you'll find commonalities in the work that you do, regardless of the topic. And the more you explore it, the more you'll see how you can bring practices and techniques into your day-to-day. I think the most important thing to remember is that what we're looking for here, like in all kinds of agile change, is evolutionary versus revolutionary change, right? Innovation often happens in what's been coined as the adjacent possible, right? Or the adjacent space to what we're working in now, right? And so we've evolved to the point where the internet is a major driver of business at this point. And now we need to take the next step into how do we make that business sustainable? Right, and there are all sorts of things we can do incrementally in those areas. So one of the things that I have observed and have been finding more and more is that sustainability and performance really go hand in hand, right? So as you start to tune the performance of your digital products, you are inadvertently improving the sustainability of those products. So if you think about all the things that make a product faster, right? It's reducing the bandwidth, reducing consumption, caching, using edge networks to get content to users faster, thus reducing the transit time and things like that. All of those things are good for performance. They're also good for sustainability. Likewise, most of the things, if not all the things that we do around accessibility are things that also drive sustainability, right? So giving people ways to interact with content in a text-based way rather than image-heavy, right? Letting screen readers and software systems read and contextualize content. All of those things serve to create more green products. And given that organic search is a major priority of most marketing departments, selling that sustainability and performance go hand in hand is a pretty great way to get the buy-in of the organization, right? It will improve your marketing, it will improve your search performance, and as an added effect, help improve the environment. And so again, and I know I've kind of rambled on here at length, and I'll shorten up here so someone else can talk, but we've been through this similar kind of experience before. I think many of us stood right here in the same place not too long ago and had these same conversations about accessibility. Accessibility is enough, to take on this charge. And we talked about it and we talked about it. And it wasn't really until regulation and financial impact started to take hold, right? That law started to be passed, that websites and digital products had to be accessible to all people, but people really started to take it seriously. And then they started to see the knock-on benefit, again, for search traffic, for discoverability of your products. Accessibility is tremendous for that, notwithstanding the fact that it's really important to create products that are accessible to everyone. That just seems like a basic thing that we should all agree on. Well, it's the same concept with sustainability. Sustainability itself is enough of a reason to pursue sustainability, right? But there are also knock-on benefits for the business. And let's not wait until there's financial regulation and until there's fines and penalties before we embrace it. Let's do it because it's the right thing and because it's the good thing for our products.
Wow. No, thank you for that. I mean, speaking of making changes to not just the product, but then the sort of business around it. Just putting you on the spot again, Michael. You've launched an initiative recently to enable teams to you're calling it tinkering, but it sounds more profound than that.
Yeah, one of the things that I'm very excited about establishing in Method is this tinkering initiative around sustainability. We've got so much talent here and still, coming into the organization, and we want to start to harness some of that in this big initiative, sustainability. How do those big questions like, how do we make something sustainable? How do we create or do something more sustainably? We want to give our employees, our teammates, the space to explore, research, play, tinker, if you will, around some of these ideas, of course, on a smaller micro scale that, doesn't have any direct impact to a client, but give them a space to explore some of these ideas and these concepts. Ultimately, this will also have an impact on our own capability, our own experience. We've talked about learning and really upskilling ourselves in this space. As a business designer, I do have a certain lens and experience and acumen for what I do, but now more than ever, with sustainability being added to the mix, it's really challenging my own perceptions. And so, again, going back to tinkering, this is a safe space for team members to collaborate and think creatively around some of these problems, and again learn the impact and see how they may apply to our clients. And so again, looking at that, we want to make sure that we build this repository of ideas, concepts, and really push the bounds of sustainability into the future.
Fantastic. So sort of engineer right, gather up our right ideas, but Sandrine, how do we design low impact services and products even before any of this happens?
Yeah, I've been pretty active. I think my best advice for the designers out there who are listening to us and the product managers, and what we've been doing here at Method as well, is don't wait for the green brief. Don't wait that the client comes to you with a net zero target or some challenges around their supply chain, their offering, and how to make it greener. So to say, I would encourage everyone here to be the change that they want to see. And so now is the moment, like for every project, every activity, to see that as the opportunity to rethink how we do things, so that we don't break the ecosystem that we were talking about any further. We talked about, Josh, you mentioned, dark mode and full bleed, autoplay videos, and this kind of UI components. Every step, every little small step matters. At Method, we created this designer's guide to kind of socialize a bit more the knowledge that we started gathering internally, to help our community of designers to design more responsibly. So essentially, when you go into a project, it's the sweet spot of design and innovation is no longer just desirable, viable, and feasible. It's also thinking the responsibility and what is the impact of what I'm thinking on the planet. And now, for the immediate kind of benefit of your clients and the end users, but also in the future, because I think there's a big element to sustainability in general that it's about enabling also future generations to keep living in a comfortable way, the same way that we are doing today. So yeah, we provided like a checklist of simple actionable steps. As Helen was mentioning, is really encouraging everyone to zoom out, but also being able to zoom in, but really like look at this as we have a global playground, so to say, at the moment. And it's always about looking at this from, not anymore from a human perspective, but really from a planet perspective. And so there is a lot of planet-centric frameworks out there that can be reusable, and knowledge from working closely with engineers and experts along the process as well.
Nice. And I'm assuming, of course, that the things that you're talking about, checklists and the guide that you mentioned, will be available to folks perhaps on this call, maybe?
We can do a version that we can share out.
Why not?
Why not? Absolutely. But also, I mean, anyone who is like we love to talk about it. We love to reason about that problem space. So really happy to keep talking about it beyond this call and helping our clients.
No, just in the interest of time, I'm just going to have to hurry us along slightly, but just want to turn it over to Helen. So if anybody's on this call and has responsibility for design in their organization, what advice would you give for somebody who's trying to go along this path in the same way that we perhaps have? Maybe they're further ahead.
I mean, I'd say start off by embracing a holistic approach and a systems thinking mindset. Then move on to iterate your tools and methods to encompass sustainability in everything that you do. Grow the shared understanding in your organization that humans are no longer at the top of a pyramid, but part of an ecosystem. And the approach I described earlier and the way I've been working is actually systems thinking. Read up on it and adapt how you manage your teams accordingly. Create and promote that moment, bring others to join you. Collaboration, co-creation are really key here. And then find those wayfinders, find the Sandrines, the Joshes and the Michaels who are in the organization who are going to kickstart different aspects towards making our lives and collectively better. And when those wayfinders create viable alternatives to current approaches, tools and processes, give others a new path to follow.
Can't say fairer than that. Thank you. And finally, Joshua, if you were to give any advice or inspiration.
As I said at the beginning, the big money has already voted. So the influence of Larry Fink and BlackRock joining the Climate Action 100 Plus, which is now the Climate Action almost 700, and represents $60 trillion of investment, saying we will not invest in your businesses any longer if you do not adhere to the Paris Climate Accord targets. And Larry Fink talked about this at the beginning of the Economist Innovations Forum a couple of months ago, where he said the money has already voted and the consumers are lagging slightly. So the consumers may be 3 to 4 years tops behind where investment has already gone, and the gap is closing. And that, to him, is where the most interesting business challenges are. So Sandrine, you said it beautifully, is that don't wait for this to come to you because it's already upon you. The speed of change is overwhelming, and this is table stakes, which is incredibly heartening, but also it's the biggest challenge that maybe any of us have faced in our careers, to be on board with the speed of change.
I've heard it said. Thank you. I've heard it said that the UN Sustainable Development Goals, of which obviously climate change is a huge part, are like the world's to-do list. Would you go with that?
Well, not only the fact that every country in the world is aligned with them now, whether they know it or not, but if the cost of not getting it right is that we don't exist anymore. You know, the reason why I do this and I'm on this mission is because I'm the parent of a young child, and I don't want her generation to be the last of humankind. And I know that you know, that could be a bit of a buzzkill, but that is the conversation that we're having. And to be able to use that as a guiding principle in everything that we do, sitting in our chairs at work, knowing that we do have an impact, we can affect something other than what is an almost certain dark future for humankind. So we can get busy and actually affect powerful change, one person at a time, one consumer at a time, and one participant in these great networks and communities at a time.